guys, we have someone absolutely special. I mean, Alden is special to me as a person, in person, because I know Alden for a very, very long time. But he is an absolutely unbelievable artist. I want to call him an artist, but he is a photographer, he's a director. So, Alden, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Ejaz. Yeah, I started as an assistant some 20 years ago. I worked for you as an assistant uh, throughout the East Coast, doing very fun, crazy, wild shoots. I remember boiler rooms, prisons, um, on the side of the ocean, on docks, and everywhere in between. And then I moved out to California to pursue my photography. It was a little bit easier for me to get out here and get started, being a non working or unknown photographer. I quickly was consumed by the commercial industry and started directing commercials right at the time where the Canon's 5D, et cetera, was taking over and allowing anybody to shoot a commercial. So I got sucked up into that, started directing commercials, which is very similar to my photography. It was all visual based stuff. And then just recently, since my three kids were born and my hobby of photographing kids has blossomed, I've been shooting portraits, but grand style portraits. So, up to 8 feet large portraits of children as well.
How does one as talented as you are mix the two genres? Everybody says if you want to be successful, you got to focus on one thing and make that work and so on. But I remember in the days when we were working together, you had a project which literally made me feel like, oh my God, this guy is so creative. You're doing something with bulbs, and they
Yeah,
had to go off or they had to burst or something like that.
yeah, yeah.
Saying to myself, I am so blessed to have Alden by my side. He's so creative. And then you go from that, and you were doing that as a project for photography. And then you go from there to doing commercials. Like that is art, what you were doing. And then you go to commercial. How do you blend the two? How do you work that? Like what is your mindset?
I think that being creative is an outlet that's necessary for people like you and I. If I'm sitting at home and not doing something creative, I'm going crazy. So be it photography or directing or art, as long as we're making something that satisfies my need for being creative, that I'm being fulfilled. But on the flip side of that, I have horrible ADD, and that's why I'm doing so many different things. I get super into a subject and I read everything about it and I watch every video about it and I talk to everybody possible about it. And then after 6 months, I get bored of it and I move on to the next project. So that's why it's easy for me to step in back and forth and dip my foot into these projects and back out. The art, I always want to do art, but it's not commercially viable. So when I was doing that project that you're talking about, I built a wall and I put lamp bases, porcelain lamp bases, and I put 72 light bulbs that I drilled holes into, filled them up with oxyacetylene, which is what welders use, and then blew them up at the same time. And the explosion I captured on an 8x10 Deerdorf, which is what Ansel Adams uses. So the negative is 8x10. I got one shot of that and I printed it out 8 feet large and made no money on it and lost a lot of money on it. But you know what? I'm happy. And I still, see that print occasionally. And it was a fun project that I got to work with a bunch of my friends. Fast forward out to California. Like I said, I got sucked up into doing commercials. I had got to learn about a whole new industry where I was used to just doing photography and I wanted to just do photography. But with commercials, I can do the same thing as photography, but with a much, much, much bigger budget and with a bunch of people that are tremendously smart and a lot smarter than I am to be able to achieve what we want to do. Example is we had to break cell phones for one of the projects because we were trying to show how one company's cell phone was shatter resistant or shatter proof. And we tried and tried and tried. I came up with 30 different ways to make a shoot, like an air powered shoot for a cell phone to fly down and hit a table and explode. And we're going to capture it on a phantom, super high speed. Nothing worked. And we ended up having a grip, which is someone that does, you know, rigging on set, light stands and rigging and all that kind of stuff. Make a slide and a rubber band, and he shot it out like that. And of course, it worked a lot better than I could have come up with. So being able to work with really smart people has been, you know, one of the joys of being an interdisciplinary artist and photographer, etc.
As an artist who's creating something for himself, the focus is one object or one thing or one thought process. And then you're focusing on that until you achieve what you want. But then when you're hired by someone and he's footing the bills, a company or a client, he's footing the bills, he or she is footing the bills, and their creative process, or I should say their wants don't match your creative process, how do you deal with that?
It's a constant back and forth and struggle. Like I said, working with some of these people are, you know, just so much more talented than I can ever dream of being. But I have to bring my expertise and my background in and try to add to the project in any way possible. But then you're also dealing with owners or marketing teams, et cetera, that aren't creatives and that think in the past, hey, this sells better if you do it this way. I want it to look this way. Or an owner that has not a creative bone in their body, but you know, has an idea of what they want to see because they saw a magazine from a couple weeks ago. So you know, it's our job as creatives to push and push and push what we think is our best ideas, and then at the end of the day, it's, you know, our hands are off at a certain point where if they want to control and dictate, it's their money and they have to be able to do that. That's where you know, it's a stark contrast from doing spec shoots and doing tests, etc., to doing a project with a client, because all of a sudden you're not in charge and they're hiring you for your aesthetic and generally for what you shoot on your own, and then they want to mold you into something a little different. Or, you know, the bigger you get, the more you can just put your foot down and say, no, this is my style, this is what I shoot. I enjoy shooting my own art more than anything because it's an expression of myself and there's no other person that's telling me how to do it, what to do, etc. But at the same time, I don't have those giant budgets then. I also don't have that giant crew of people to help me get that polished product, which I'd love to have the best of both worlds. It just isn't going to happen at this point.
I struggle with that myself, that when I'm doing my own funded film or photography or whatever I'm doing, and it's I am the boss and no one else to answer to other than my wife, then you know, then I do what I want and it's much more pleasing and I get what I want out of it. But when I'm with a client, then it comes out to being a little bit differently. I'm working for them. So where do you say to yourself, I'm going to do 30% of my work and 70% of the client's work? Do you work that way?
It depends. You know, I have some clients that I've worked with for 11, 12 years now that, you know, they'll argue with me, I'll argue with them. It's a loving relationship. But at the end of the day, I'll be like, hey, listen, do you trust me? And they're like, yeah, we trust you. And I say, all right, then let's do it and we'll see what happens. And if we need to do it the other way, we'll go back. And generally I'll get a, you know, a pat on the back afterwards when it's all done and in the can saying, hey, you know, that was a great idea. Seldomly, I'll also get a punch in the back saying, that wasn't the best idea. I wish we did it the other way. At the end of the day, you know, when you're shooting something, you don't know how it's going to cut together. With photography, it's easy because you see it on the screen, you know what's going to happen. When you're shooting a commercial and you have a narrative, you have a story, you don't know how it's going to cut together. And you have to be an editor as well as being a director, as well as being, you know, a prop master and everything else at the same time to know what you want that final thing to look like. And a lot of people don't have that same knowledge base or experience to say, hey, I need this shot beforehand to add to this shot afterwards. And it's just a completely different world when you're doing that kind of stuff. And that's why they hire a team to do it. And you're not just going out there with a phone and getting a oneer that you're going to throw up on your website, right?
You are basically telling a story in one frame, done, you know. And I'm not saying that it's easy or it's difficult. I fight with myself. Which one is the easier one? And how do you transition from there to being a director with moving images? How do you do that? Like, how do you prepare differently?
You know, there's so much pre-production on a commercial. I'll spend for a 2-day shoot, I'll spend a month on the job, and ramping up into it. The director scout and tech scout and meeting with my DP and all my department heads, the production designer, etc. That gets my mind back into working on a bigger project, working with a storyboard artist, that simple, or writing the director's treatment. Those things get me back into, okay, this is how this is going to flow. And when I'm shooting commercials, sometimes they'll want stills additionally on top of that, where I'll have to set up a different set right next to it and shoot stills of the same, models. That's the hardest thing I can do. When it's one person doing both of those, going back and forth, bouncing is really hard for me because I try to focus on just doing the commercial aspect, and then the photography becomes secondary. But, I've done it numerous times and it does work out. But I don't enjoy doing that, want to do that.
So, which one of them do you take for granted, photography or filmmaking?
I've been a photographer since I was 14, spending just every single waking hour outside of school in a dark room. At my school, I went to boarding school, and at my school, they had a phone in the dark room that didn't shut off with everyone else's phone. So I would sit there talking to my girlfriend, or, my dad, or my mom, or friends all around the States. And because of that, I got super into photography. And through the photography, I, found art, I guess. But because of photography, everything else happened. And photography, I probably take for granted because I know it so well. I know it inside and out. Like, you throw me any kind of camera, I'm gonna have fun with it. I'm gonna geek out on it, and I'm going to want to take awesome pictures with it. It doesn't matter if it's 100 years old, 8x10, 11x14, digital, point and shoot, phone. It's just it's so ingrained in me. So the other stuff is harder for me, and I had to work harder at it. With the commercials, I had to learn how to edit in my head. Had to learn how to edit on a computer to make a commercial. But photography, that that's why my portraits that I'm doing now are so much fun, because during the pandemic, I got myself a little Leica point and shoot, and have been shooting my kids, which you do, but it turned into a whole different project of shooting my kids. And I took it way more seriously than I think most parents would. And I tried to document, but also, just take interesting, captivating photos of them. But it's so second nature. It's fun for me. Directing commercials is work for me. I have to think about it. I've spent a lot of time on it. It's never for myself. It's not art. Shooting photos is like my outlet, and it's second nature. So it's just kind of like an extension. It's a third arm.
The new business that you started with the kids' portraits, could you tell us how that bulb went off in your brain and why?
So my kids go to a Emilio Reggio. It's a Montessori type nursery school, and the school was asking for photographs of the kids for the yearbook, and I reluctantly said yes. I was like, this is going to be so difficult with all these little kids, running around, and it's also going to be so boring because like yearbook photos are not interesting. So I sat up a couple nights before. I remember vividly thinking, like, how am I going to make this interesting? Like, what kind of photo effects can I use, or what camera can I shoot it on? What can I do with the kids? I'm just trying to, plus it, make it better, make it more memorable. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go super simple. I want to get the essence of the kids. So I want to shoot black and white. I want to um, capture like a candid moment with these kids, which I don't ever think I've ever seen in yearbook photos or even with children's photography. Usually the kids are playing and smiling, and it's a little hammy. But I was trying to channel my inner Avedon and go like into the West where it's very, it's not like serious, but you're looking into their soul. You're looking past them and into them. So the first year at the school, I threw up a black backdrop. It was a muslin, and I just bounced light back into the kids and shot on my Leica little Leica point and shoot Q2, and I had maybe 30 seconds to a minute and a half with each kid where I could actually keep their attention span. But while I was shooting it, I'm getting goosebumps right now. While I was shooting it, I knew that I had something special. And I was looking through the photos, and I hadn't had that much fun shooting something in a long time, because getting these honest pictures of 2 to 4 year olds was just mind blowing to me. So I did that for 2 years. The second year I did it on a white background, and I used I used strobes as well. The second year, I plussed it up a little bit. I sculpted the light a little bit more around their faces. But still, it was 2 minutes per kid, and I cycled through 40 kids, in an hour and a half, which was crazy. Um, cycle Doing that, I shot a couple portraits of my own kids
Same place.
in the same place. Yeah, so my middle child Teddy is at that school, but I also then had my older daughter who's 7 and my youngest daughter who is not even 2. I was like, oh, just take some portraits of them. I took those portraits, I blew them up really large, and then printed them out. But the heads were, 4 feet wide, and they're my favorite photos I've ever taken. And when I saw that, I knew that I needed to do this for other people. I needed to be able to capture that moment so people could, put that on their walls, and thought it was just very special and different. So it turned into me doing life size and larger photos of, 2 to 10 year olds. But so it's an art piece. It's more artistic than anything. I'm capturing a kid, but in a portrait session, and it's different than, majority of anything else I've ever shot before.
Alden, your wife is also in the creative industry.
She produces photo shoots and commercials. We met on set. It was a showmance, as they say.
What are her thoughts about your work?
I know that she's a tough critic, right? She's not going to tell me she likes something if she doesn't, and she has very good taste. And I'm usually a little reluctant when I want to get to a very finished place with one of my projects before I show her, because I want, um, I don't want to disappoint. When I showed her this project, I like screamed from across the room when I was doing a small print. I was like, "You have to see this." And of course, it was our kids, so like we love the picture regardless. And my first question was, "Is it just that I love my kids so much that this is so special?" And she goes, "It doesn't matter. Everyone loves their kids that much. It'll be that special for everybody." And that's when I knew that I was like, this is awesome. This is really special. So she's been super supportive of me pivoting again, because that's all I do is pivot, pivot, pivot. But it's a awesome, fun project that everyone that I've been showing it to seems super interested and wants to do it them for their kids.
Let's talk a little bit about pivoting, right? Because God only knows, I think I am the master of pivoting.
I'm right behind you there.
I have gone from magazine to clothing business to fashion to wildlife to filmmaking to whatever, right? So, how do you deal with it? Like, what do you say to yourself?
I think it's as much me dealing with it as much as my family dealing with it, because, like I said, my ADD is bad, and I see a shiny object and I want to go photograph it or make art out of it. So it's hard. And when you pivot, you're starting from scratch again. Like, not starting from scratch 100%, but it's a whole different project. It's a whole different thing. It's hard. I know that I'm going to be successful doing it, but my family doesn't. It's a hard pill to swallow. So you know, I think that I wouldn't pivot unless I knew deep down that it was something amazing and awesome, and different and unique. Um, but that's talking to my wife about it. Um, you know, in the back of my mind is that tinge of like, is this a bad idea? Like, should I be doing this? It's going to take a lot of time to get off the ground. I have to figure out all these things from website to marketing materials to outreach to people. Um, it's, hours that I could be working on a different, more commercially viable project. But at the end of the day, what do I want for my life and what do I want to make me happy and the rest of my family happy? I mean, I think about it like if I'm going to be photographing kids, it's going to affect my family life because kids have a finite window. When I pick up my daughter from school at 2:45, I try not to go on my phone from 2:45 to 7:30 because I want to spend that quality time with my kids. Well, if I'm photographing kids, I'm going to be shooting them from 2:45 to 7:30, right? This is the same window. So that's one of the first things I thought about. It is going to affect my quality of life. Um, but you have to put up boundaries and figure out a way to navigate that. Younger kids it won't affect because they don't have to go to school at the same time.
Do you ever say to yourself that I am going to do this? It will affect my family. Um, but in the end of the day, it's going to be good for all of us. Do you convince yourself to say that, or do you truly believe that that's going to happen?
When it comes to my family, it depends on a return on investment. I have a books full of art projects that I'd love to do. I'm not going to see any return on that investment. So they are shelved for now. Um, Doing portraits of children or shooting a commercial, or even doing a spec spot, there's a return on that, which, right now at this point in my life, I do need to make money. I can't just think about my passion projects. And I can think about those passion projects when I'm older or on the side when I've made money with these other projects or when I can take resources like if I have a photo shoot that I've done and we wrap early and I can knock something out with the assistance and equipment that I have, that's great. But I can't take resources away from what I'm doing right now to work on those passion projects or just taking away time from my kids. I want to spend every second of their day when they're not at school with them. I want to spend every second of every weekend with them as well because the reason I'm capturing these portraits is because they grow up so fucking fast. It's crazy. Like before you know it, like you said, your son is, towering above you and works a job. And I knew him when he was like 2. So, it happens fast and you don't want to capture that.
I don't care much to impress people generally, but I always care to impress the ones around me, my wife, my kids, my family, my brother, my sister, and friends, and so on. Do you have such thing? Do you want to impress your wife and your kids? I don't know if your kids really understand what you do, but
All I
does
want
it
to do is
feel
impress my family. That's all I want to do. Yeah, of course. Like putting a smile on my kid's face. That's why I do stupid dad jokes and magic tricks for them because I'm so cool right now. And I know that in 5 years, my daughter's going to look at me and roll her eyes and walk away. So I have to, jump on it while I can. My wife, yeah, she's, like I said, she's an incredibly hard critic. And I know that if I can impress her, then I'm onto something. But at the same time, there will be projects where she doesn't like the output. And she's like, I don't know, I just don't like the whole idea. And I know deep down inside that I like the idea and I don't care. But it will get me thinking, like, how do I make it better? How do I change it or tweak it so it's a little bit better because I value her opinion more than I value anyone else's opinion. But also having, living in New York, we had mutual friends like Zach and Ryan and a bunch of other people who, I like having that brain trust of people that I can bounce ideas off of. And I don't want their approval. I just want their feedback, like criticism. If I show you my project or I show Zach a project, I know that I'm going to get honest feedback. And I think that's important. I don't care about impressing you. but I do care about your feedback. And I think that's really important as an artist to be able to have that network of criticism, or brain trust or whatever you want to call it.
Can you share a moment with us when your, I'm going to say the oldest daughter, but any of your kids were like totally impressed with your work, not being a cool dad? Did that moment happen yet, or they're still too young?
If India sees a commercial of mine on TV, or she sees a lot of Anna's posters, billboards around, of work that she's produced, she's so impressed. She's like, my dad made that, my mom made that, and it's very impressive to her. The she loves sitting next to me and going through photos with me in Lightroom, which is a lot of fun. Um, yeah, she's 7. Doing a simple drawing, like a sketch of someone else, like blows her away. So, it's a little too much positive reinforcement when you're around her, but it's great. Well, and you have to act the same way with her. When she does a little doodle, I'm incredibly impressed. So it's a two-way street. And when my son, who loves taking pictures, we have a little camera for him that doesn't have a screen on it. It's a digital camera, but there's no screen. So he goes around and takes pictures, and then we put him on my computer, and he gets to go see, a couple hours later, all the pictures that he took. He's really impressed with himself. And then I think he understands, we can talk about it and say, hey, like, maybe if you framed it this way, or you shot up, or a different perspective, and then he gets super interested in trying to go do stuff again. He can look at my work, and I don't think he's impressed at all by my work, but I think that he can, enjoy going through photographs with me. And my youngest daughter, who's 2, just doesn't like me, so it doesn't matter. I can't impress her with anything. So
Well,
I could bring home a donut for her, and she'd say, "No, Daddy, no."
you've done this amazing, amazing project, an art project, not a commercial for someone else, but an art project, and you brought it home and you've shown it to your wife, and you are dying for her to say, "Wow, that's amazing," and you don't get it. Um, what goes through your brain? Is my project bad, or am I bad?
Oh, I get into it. I want to know. I'm like, tell me why. Like, why is this your response? I need to know. Uh, and we'll argue about it, and I'll try to show my points, and she'll try to show hers, and I'll say like, well, what about this? Doesn't it make you feel this way, or don't you see this in it? And she's like, I don't see any of that in it. I don't, it doesn't make me feel that way. And like I said, sometimes I have to persevere and think that my idea is better and that other people will like it, or you know, at the end of the day, I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for anyone else. Commercially viable stuff you're doing for other people, like the kids' portraits, you want the family members to like it. And there's actually a fine line with that. A lot of these portraits are very solemn looking faces. They're not big smiles. And my wife is constantly saying, like, you need to make it, there's a smiling picture in the portfolio. You need to use that one, or in the shoot, you need to use that one, not the grimacing one. I'm like, but look how powerful the grimacing one is. You can see into the child, you can see who they really are, because it's that quick moment where they're not being told what to do. They're investigating my camera, they're investigating me, they're wondering what's going on. This is who they really are. And at the end of the day, a lot of times, seldomly not, but a lot of times, after it's printed, she agrees, and she's like, you know what, that was the right photo. That was the one that was hard to swallow. And it's even harder for the parents to understand that. The parents will be like, oh, don't you have a happier picture of my child? But then, I'm happy to go in that direction if they want to, but I push hard not to, because I don't want the kids to look angry or sad, but I want them to look real.
I have spent many, 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 many years with my wife, and my boys are older now. Jared's 25, Troy is 21. I've yet to get "Wow, Dad" or "Wow, Ejaz." I haven't gotten it. Quite
Yeah.
honestly speaking, I don't think I'll ever get it, because it's their father who's making it. And I've kind of given up on the fact that they're going to say "wow." Is that how you, I mean, I'm sure you are in the pursuing stage of getting the wow from your family. What happens if you don't get it?
When I know something special and it keeps me up at night because I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking about it all day long, then I mean, maybe my art doesn't line up with my kids' art, and that's okay. You know, they can be into um, Renaissance painting, which I'm not really into. You know, I like post-contemporary art, um, which is a very different type of artwork. You know, we try to do a lot of stuff together, go to art museums and watch art shows, and do drawing class, that kind of stuff. But you know, our aesthetic is also different. You know, I hope they appreciate what I'm doing, but I don't expect to get a wow, I guess, from them or my wife. I want them to appreciate what I'm doing and do the best version of what I'm doing.
You had a career in New York, you have a career in LA. I have lost a lot of friends to LA, so I have this sour relationship towards that. But you are one of the few that have gone from New York to LA and made a living, and you're successful. What advice do you give a photographer or a filmmaker? Is LA the place or is New York the place? Like, did that play a part?
I met my wife on set in LA when I had moved back here for a year and I wasn't planning on staying. I was planning on going back to New York. We met and she's actually from the East Coast and we couldn't, you know, figure out a way to get back. She was working here, I was working here, and we have never wanted to stay here. So LA is not our favorite place. It just happens to be where we are right now. And if we could do what we're doing, I don't think New York City would be the spot either, but if we could go to Connecticut, Charleston, um, Spain, Greece, anywhere else, we'd be very happy. Um, LA is a good place for young hustlers to get into this industry because everybody's coming out of film school and wants to make something. They want to be the next big director, actor, etc. So, you know, there's a lot of upward mobility, but it's the same in New York. And I'd argue that in New York, it's probably easier to um, meet some random person at a party that'll publish your work in a magazine than it is out in LA because that happened to me a number of times. I'd be out at a bar, I'd meet someone, and all of a sudden I was working with them a week later. And I think you get a lot more of that in New York than LA, and I think it's better as when you're younger to do that. LA is just so spread out, and it's very different social scenes for every party. Whereas New York, you're all together in the same bars and restaurants and stuff, and everyone seems like an asshole, but they're also a lot friendlier. Um, so I don't think that LA is any better for anything. It just I can have a yard and have kids running around and still be in the middle of the city, which is the biggest bonus in LA.
What advice do you have for someone who's trying to break in as a photographer or a commercial director or a director in films and so on?
Never turn down work, no matter who it is. Just keep on doing it. I mean, I met you, Ejaz, and I worked with you for I don't know 3 4 years before I moved back out to LA, and I learned a lot, met a lot of people for sometimes just tiny shoots. But I never ever would say no if I wasn't doing something else. Um, and you know the bigger shoots pay off when you have the smaller shoots in between. There were, you know, when we did the big shoots, I would meet a whole crew of people and be able to pull them on to my stupid projects. um Forever that I met on set with you. Do what you love and don't worry about the money when you're young. Just, you know, it changes very quickly as soon as you have kids. Your time is finite, and your time is the most important thing that you have. And so the moment you have kids, that clock is ticking down until they turn 18 and go to college. Get all that work out of the way, that you're slaving over stuff, that you're working long nights, that you're doing crazy things in your 20s. So then in your 30s, you can enjoy your kids. Because you can't start that over again. And I wish that I had better time managed my 20s. Um, because, you know, I'm still pivoting and doing new things in my 30s. But I'm trying to be cognizant of my kids who are speaking in the background right now. I apologize if you hear them.
Tell us, when are you going to pivot towards filmmaking?
I wanted to do it very badly. And I think that it's just like I said, to make your first film, you need a tremendous amount of resources. You need to dedicate every second of your time to a project that is probably never going to be seen more than a couple hundred people from more than a couple hundred people. I don't know if I have that in me right now to do that. If I um, found a script that was mine that I loved, then I would, you know, um, turn over the world to make it happen. But that hasn't happened yet. You know, the more that 7-year journey of trying to make a film, I realized that it's all in the writing. You have to have a good script first and foremost. And if you're not a writer director, which I'm not a writer in any way, um, then it's going to be much harder because those talented writers out there don't want to give a first time director a really good script. Um, but it is paramount that you have just a phenomenal script. Everything else you can figure out on the way, I think. But having um, something that a story that people want to hear. I mean, you can ruin it 100 different ways as a director, I'm sure, but starting off with a really good script is very important.
You were one of my inspirations to get into directing. This was when we were working together, and you had done something with someone. And I think there were three or four of you, maybe you and Zach, and I think Ryan was involved. I don't know who, but there were like 4 or 5 of you making a film. I'm like, why can't I do it? But again, I kept myself low and I did what I had to do with photography. And when the time was right and the script fell in my lap, that's when I made it. So you'll hope and see that your script falls in your lap soon enough.
You set your mind on something and you do it. It's that simple, Ejaz. You've always been that way, and it's been inspiration for me. And when we talk, and I have an idea, and your response is like, "Okay, so why haven't you done it already?" Like it's that simple. It's matter of fact. Like, so, okay, great, Alden. So like, why are you talking to me? Go do it. And I think you need that tenacity to be able to persevere in any of these artistic fields. Um, so I definitely look up to you in that respect. I wanted to say before, shooting commercials, you get very um, it's a cushy job when you're shooting a commercial versus your first short film, because on a commercial you can have a couple $1 million for 3 days to shoot. When you get to have all the toys and like, oh, I want to use a techno crane over here, and I want to make the talent spin 360 degrees while the camera's going overhead, and I want a boat going around the background, like all that stuff. Like on a commercial, they're like, great, yeah, make it happen. On a short film, you're like, are you smoking crack? Like, what are you talking about? That's not going to happen. Like, you want me to cut out a cardboard boat and make it go through the background? So you have to get resourceful when you're doing that, and it's hard to start over and start doing that again. But it's also a lot of fun to be super resourceful. I mean, I've done stop motion projects where it was like the first one was just a couple people, and we had to figure out how to do it. And then the second one that came from that job was we had a crew of like 30 people doing a stop motion 30-second spot, and all of a sudden, like, you're like, oh, this is easy. All I'm doing is directing a bunch of people on how to make this project work. So you kind of have to rip that band-aid off and start over again, which, there's no reason I can't do that.
I have gone through and met so many creatives in my own career, and you are definitely someone I think is super creative, super technical. You have the mind of both sides, so to speak. And if you ask me, which you don't have to, but if you ask me, I'm going to say to you, please pursue your directing career because I think you will be amazing at it.
Thank you. I want to add one more thing to what you were saying earlier, or what you asked about advice for younger people coming up. Personally, being what you just said, being technical, I get bogged down in the details. I will spend years thinking about how I want to photograph something in a very specific way that has never been done before. And I don't know if it's because I want to do it technically or if it's going to help the final product. But, I will talk to people on the phone about, okay, I need to do a 2000 megapixel camera, but I don't want to stitch it side to side with nodal point panorama stitching. This is what I'm thinking. How am I going to do it? And people are like, why are you even thinking about this? Like, what is your problem? And then reality hits and I'm like, oh, I should just shoot it and deal with it later. So there's a saying, I think it's um, perfection is the enemy of completion. And it's true. And so, just get out there and shoot instead of trying to do the perfect job is very important for me personally. And I know that working with you, Ejaz, like you would go out there, you were a perfectionist, but you also shot a tremendous amount of fashion stuff. Like we were shooting once a week and then editing through the week and then shooting another weekend and just over and over and over. And you hone your craft and your skill. And it was, a kick in the butt for me to just get shit done.
Thank you for doing what you did, because if there's anyone that I can depend on, and I know I can look the other way, which I haven't had. I have to be honest with you. I haven't had that. Is you, Alden. I mean, I can just
Thank you,
say,
Ejaz.
hey, Alden, I need the shadow to be on the camera side and walk away and know that everything is taken care of. That's a gift that you have, because you will make sure that it happens. So yeah, I mean that's not just art, right? That's like I said, you have the combination of being an artist and an engineer at the same time. So I think playing director is going to be amazing for you.
We have a nice
Um,
mutual admiration club going between you and I.
Alden, thank you for getting on, coming and talking to us, helping the viewer know the journey of being an artist. It's not always happy and whatnot. You have to, battle amongst in your brain with your family, with money, with moving around and so on. But we wish you luck. Thanks for coming on, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Ejaz. My love to your family, and see you soon.